The sun beat down relentlessly on the arid expanse, a vast, indifferent ocean of sand and rock stretching to a shimmering horizon. This was the Jordanian desert, a place where secrets were buried deep and the wind whispered tales of forgotten struggles. For Elias, a seasoned operative of Mossad, its desolation mirrored the landscape of his own soul. Years of clandestine operations had chiseled away at his youthful idealism, leaving behind a man hardened by duty, yet still fiercely devoted to the nation he served. His loyalty was not born of blind patriotism, but forged in the crucible of personal tragedy. A family shattered by an act of terror, leaving him with an unyielding resolve to safeguard his homeland. Now, a new, insidious threat loomed. Whispers had turned to shouts within the agency, hinting at a deep-seated rot. A network of double agents meticulously burrowing into the very foundations of Israel's national security. The stakes were impossibly high. Lives depended on uncovering this treachery, and the very existence of the nation felt precarious. A cold dread settled in Elias's stomach, colder than any desert night, as the first chilling hint of a mole within Mossad itself surfaced. The realization was a gut punch, transforming the mission from a hunt for external enemies to an agonizing search for a viper in their own nest. Elias was tasked with identifying this traitor, a lonely and dangerous undertaking that demanded absolute discretion and an iron will. He was a ghost, moving through shadows even within his own organization, his purpose hidden from all but a select few. The vast, unforgiving Jordanian desert was to be his primary stage, its stark beauty a terrifying backdrop for the coming confrontation. Initial intelligence, fragmented and terrifying, pointed towards a high-ranking official, a revelation that sent shivers through the agency and raised the stakes to an almost unbearable degree. The thought of such a person, entrusted with the nation's deepest secrets, turning against them was almost unthinkable. Elias had sacrificed everything for the agency, relationships, a semblance of a normal life, even parts of his own humanity. These sacrifices were not loudly proclaimed but etched into the lines around his eyes, the perpetual tension in his shoulders. He carried the weight of countless unseen battles, moments of brutal necessity that had left indelible marks. Now, an ominous feeling of being watched, a pervasive sense of distrust, permeated even the hallowed halls of Mossad. Every glance, every hushed conversation, felt charged with unspoken suspicion. Then came the intercepted message, a string of coded characters that, once decrypted, hinted at a clandestine meeting deep within the desert. It was a lifeline, a tangible lead in a sea of suspicion. The first visual of the desolate landscape, captured by a high-altitude drone, emphasized its brutal isolation. It was a place where no one would hear you scream, where the sand swallowed secrets whole. Elias began his meticulous preparations, each item in his kit a testament to years of honed survival skills and lethal efficiency. He packed light, knowing every ounce mattered in such an environment. He left behind no loved ones in the traditional sense, but the abstract concept of his people, his nation, weighed heavily on his shoulders. The responsibility was a crushing burden. He knew that failure here meant catastrophe, a wound to Israel that might never heal. As he crossed the invisible line into Jordanian territory under the cloak of a moonless night, a profound sense of foreboding settled upon him. The desert air, cold and sharp, seemed to whisper warnings of the treachery that lay ahead. His journey had just begun, and the sands were already shifting beneath his feet. Elias, a solitary figure against the harsh, indifferent canvas of the desert, initiated his surveillance. The sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth and reflecting blinding light that distorted the horizon. He moved with the quiet grace of a predator, his eyes constantly scanning, absorbing every minute detail of the unforgiving terrain. His mission was to find the Serpent, a shadowy operative whose intelligence flowed like poison into the veins of Israel's enemies, empowering them, making them deadly. Early clues, fragments of intercepted communications and overheard whispers began to coalesce, suggesting an unexpected individual, one who defied Elias's initial assumptions about the typical profile of a traitor. It was a person far too close to the heart of the operation, making the potential damage catastrophic. He remembered the day he was recruited into Mossad, a young man brimming with righteous fury. The memory was stark, vivid, almost painful in its clarity. A terrorist attack had ripped through his family, leaving him with an unfillable void and an unshakable resolve for justice. Mossad offered him a path, a way to channel his grief into purpose, to ensure no other family suffered as his had. He had embraced the rigorous training, the sacrifices, the absolute dedication required, believing in the purity of their cause. Now, that purity felt tainted, sullied by the creeping suspicion that festered within the agency itself. The intricate web of espionage, where trust was a dangerous luxury and suspicion a necessary tool, had never felt so suffocating. His first encounter with the Serpent's network was a tense, inconclusive observation. From a rocky outcrop, Elias watched a small convoy of vehicles, nondescript and blending seamlessly with the dusty roads, exchange packages with what appeared to be local informants. He couldn't get a clear visual of the Serpent themselves, but the meticulous coordination, the swift, almost invisible exchange, spoke volumes about their professionalism and reach. The incident left him with a chilling realization. The traitor was not just an individual providing information, but the linchpin of a sophisticated, well-oiled machine. Elias grappled with the increasingly disturbing possibility that the traitor was someone he knew, someone he perhaps even trusted. The thought was a venomous bite, injecting doubt into every past interaction, every shared mission. Who among his colleagues possessed the cunning, the access, and the cold-hearted resolve to betray their nation so thoroughly? The psychological toll of constant vigilance, of sifting through every word, every gesture for signs of disloyalty, was immense. Sleep became a luxury, plagued by fragmented dreams and the gnawing fear that he was missing something vital. A near miss confirmed the danger, and more unsettlingly, the enemy's awareness. While tracking a known contact of the Serpent, Elias found himself ambushed. A quick, brutal attack from unseen assailants. He managed to escape, leaving behind a trail of dust and a growing sense of unease. They knew he was there, or at least they suspected a Mossad presence. The harsh realities of desert survival, the relentless sun, the scarcity of water, the ever-present threat of sandstorms, added another layer of physical strain to his already burdened mind. Every step was a battle against the elements, every moment a test of endurance. Then, a small but significant piece of evidence emerged from the swirling sands. During his escape, Elias had stumbled upon a discarded piece of paper, half buried, bearing a fragment of a coded message. It was barely legible, but enough to send a jolt through him. The fragment hinted at a deeper conspiracy, one that extended beyond a single double agent, suggesting multiple layers of infiltration, a network far more extensive than initially imagined. The coded fragment, painstakingly analyzed, led him down a path he desperately wished to avoid. Growing suspicion began to coalesce around David, a colleague he had known for years, a man whose loyalty had seemed as unshakable as the desert mountains. David, with his easy smile and seemingly unwavering dedication, was an unlikely candidate. Yet the evidence, however circumstantial, pointed relentlessly in his direction. The chilling realization that the betrayal ran deeper than imagined, that it might involve someone he had once considered a brother in arms, settled over Elias like the cold, final embrace of the desert night. The sands of Jordan held many secrets, and some were far more terrifying than others. Elias received his new orders, delivered with the stark brevity characteristic of the agency. Identify and neutralize the Serpent at all costs. The directive resonated with a chilling finality, stripping away any lingering hope for a less brutal resolution. The agency, stretched thin and wary of internal leaks, could offer only limited support, a skeletal network of contacts and resources that further deepened Elias's isolation in the vast, unforgiving landscape. He was a lone wolf, tasked with hunting another, more venomous predator. His immediate priority was establishing a secure, inconspicuous base of operations. Deep within a labyrinthine wadi, Elias discovered a remote cave, its entrance obscured by wind-sculpted rock formations and thorny scrub. It was an ideal hideout, offering shelter from the elements and a vantage point for observation. Yet it also amplified his solitude, each echoing sound a reminder of his precarious existence. This was where he would live, eat and plan, surrounded only by the silence of the desert and the weight of his mission. A flicker of memory, a ghost from his past, surfaced in the quiet solitude of the cave. Elias found himself transported back to his Mossad training, years of rigorous physical and psychological conditioning designed to forge agents of unyielding will. He recalled the brutal hand-to-hand combat sessions, the simulated interrogations, the lessons in espionage and counter-espionage. Above all, he remembered the emphasis on ruthlessness, the chilling instruction to detach emotion from duty, to become an instrument of the state, precise and deadly. It was a dedication that now felt both a blessing and a curse. The following days were a series of heightened senses, a constant dance on the edge of discovery. He experienced several close calls, moments where the thin veil of his cover threatened to unravel. Once, while observing a remote outpost suspected of being part of the Serpent's network, a sudden sandstorm erupted, forcing him to scramble for cover as a patrol vehicle passed perilously close to his position. Another time, a flock of startled desert birds, disturbed by his approach, gave away his presence to a group of armed men on a distant ridge, necessitating a rapid, stealthy retreat. Each incident escalated the tension, confirming the ever-present danger and the formidable nature of his adversary. Back in the cave, Elias painstakingly deciphered more of the coded message fragment he had found. The cryptic symbols and seemingly random numbers slowly yielded their secrets, revealing not just a network, but a high-value target, a critical data transfer scheduled to occur within the next few days. This transfer, the message implied, would compromise a significant Mossad operation, potentially exposing dozens of agents and informants across the region. The identity of the Serpent remained maddeningly elusive, a tormenting shadow that danced just beyond his grasp. But the urgency of his mission intensified tenfold. Then, a breakthrough. Intercepting a low-frequency radio burst, Elias managed to piece together a fragmented communication, revealing the Serpent's next move. The data transfer was not just a threat to an existing operation, it was a prelude to something far more sinister. Elias faced a profound moral dilemma. Should he act now, exposing the traitor and preventing the immediate data leak, or should he wait, hoping to uncover the full extent of the betrayal, the entire network, even if it meant risking the immediate operation? His training screamed for immediate action, but his gut insisted on patience, on understanding the full scope of the treachery. He decided to wait, a decision heavy with potential consequences. His solitude was abruptly shattered when he was confronted by a group of nomadic Bedouins, their weathered faces etched with suspicion, their rifles pointed directly at him. They mistook him for an intruder, a threat to their ancient lands. Elias, fluent in rudimentary Arabic, managed to defuse the situation with a combination of carefully chosen words and a feigned plea for water, narrowly escaping a violent confrontation. The incident reinforced the precariousness of his position, the constant threat not just from his target, but from the very environment itself. The intercepted communication, further analyzed, yielded its most chilling revelation. The Serpent was preparing a devastating attack on Israel, an act of terror designed to cripple its intelligence infrastructure. The data transfer was merely a component, a stepping stone to a far greater catastrophe. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on Elias, a crushing burden that solidified his resolve. The time for waiting was over. He had to act, and he had to act decisively. The fragmented communication, now fully decrypted and cross-referenced with latent intelligence from his secure channels, painted a horrifyingly clear picture. Elias felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a sickening twist in his gut. The serpent, the elusive traitor whose shadow had haunted his every move, was not a stranger, not an unknown entity from the depths of enemy intelligence. It was David, his former friend, his trusted colleague from their earliest days in Mossad, the man with whom he had shared countless training exercises, late-night strategizing sessions, and even personal confidences over stale coffee in sterile agency offices. The realization hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath, leaving him momentarily paralyzed by a profound sense of betrayal that transcended professional duty. A vivid flashback assaulted Elias's mind, a cruel montage of shared moments. He saw David's easy smile during their grueling training in the Negev, David's calm, reassuring presence during their first covert operation in Beirut, David's genuine concern when Elias had been wounded on a previous mission. They had been more than colleagues, they had been brothers, bound by an unspoken code, a shared dedication to their country. Now that bond was irrevocably shattered, twisted into a grotesque mockery by David's insidious treachery. The emotional impact was immense, a heavy cloak of grief settling over his hardened heart. How could someone he had known, respected, and even loved descend into such perfidy? Elias wrestled with the question of David's motivations. Was it disillusionment, a slow erosion of faith in the ideals they once championed? Or was it something far baser, a hunger for personal gain, an insidious whisper of power or wealth from the enemy? He knew David had always harbored a quiet resentment towards certain agency policies, a belief that Mossad sometimes strayed from its moral compass. Could that quiet dissent have festered into outright treason? The thought was almost unbearable, making the desert air feel suffocating. Despite the emotional turmoil, Elias knew he could not afford to falter. The stakes were too high. He forced himself to observe David through his long-range optics, watching as his former friend meticulously made contact with a shadowy group of enemy agents in a prearranged rendezvous point, a desolate wadi barely visible on the horizon. The scene confirmed every agonizing suspicion, every fragmented piece of intelligence. David was indeed the serpent, meticulously orchestrating the devastating attack on Israel. Elias could see the subtle hand gestures, the exchange of encrypted devices, the chillingly familiar professionalism in David's movements, now directed against everything they had once sworn to protect. The plan for the attack, now clearer than ever, involved a multi-pronged assault on critical infrastructure, designed to sow chaos and cripple Israel's intelligence capabilities for years. Elias knew he had to act, and swiftly. The internal conflict raged within him. The loyalty he once felt for his friend battled fiercely with his unwavering duty to his country. But the choice, though agonizing, was ultimately clear. His oath, his family, the safety of millions, these outweighed any personal sentiment. With a heavy heart, Elias activated his secure comms, sending a coded message back to Mossad headquarters. The message was concise, devoid of emotion, yet carried the full weight of his discovery. David, confirmed as the Serpent, was actively collaborating with enemy forces, planning a catastrophic attack. The agency's response was immediate and unequivocal. The orders that crackled back through his earpiece were stark. David was to be apprehended, dead or alive, and the most painful assignment of all. Elias himself was tasked with the capture. A cold certainty settled over him. He knew this confrontation would be a fight to the death, a brutal dance between two men who once called each other brother. Elias began his preparations, checking his equipment, sharpening his knives, his mind a steel trap of focus. The weight of his decision, the crushing burden of having to betray his friend to save his country, was immense. But there was no turning back. The desert wind, a silent witness, seemed to whisper the tragic inevitability of what was to come. Elias, now a hunter consumed by his grim task, began tracking David across the unforgiving, sun-baked desert. Each footprint in the shifting sands, each dislodged stone, was a breadcrumb in a trail of betrayal. The pursuit was relentless, a silent, deadly ballet under the scorching sun. David, knowing Elias's methods, his strengths, and his weaknesses, had meticulously laid a path fraught with peril. Booby traps, cunningly concealed, lay in wait, designed not merely to injure but to delay, to exhaust, to break the spirit. Ambush points were chosen with a sniper's precision, utilizing the natural contours of the land, the deceptive shadows of rock formations. One such ambush caught Elias by surprise. A tripwire, almost invisible against the ochre dust, sent him sprawling as a small but potent explosive device detonated nearby. A searing pain shot through his left shoulder, a shard of rock having found its mark. He gritted his teeth, suppressing a cry, the physical strain adding to the immense emotional burden. The wound was superficial, but bled freely, staining his desert fatigues a darker crimson. He quickly bandaged it, his movements precise, almost robotic, the pain a dull throb against the sharp edge of his determination. This was not just a chase, it was a psychological battlefield. David, through his actions, was speaking to Elias, taunting him, challenging him to remember their shared past. Elias recalled a particularly brutal training exercise years ago, a simulated capture and evasion mission in the Negev. He and David had been paired, their roles reversed. David the hunter, Elias the hunted. David's cunning, his ability to disappear and reappear as if by magic, his almost preternatural awareness of his surroundings had earned him the nickname, the Phantom. Elias remembered the sheer frustration of being outmaneuvered, only to turn the tables with an unexpected counter-tactic. Now, those memories were not just recollections, they were lessons informing his every move. David, cunning and expertly trained, was a formidable opponent. He attempted to lure Elias into a deeper trap, leaving small personal items, a half-smoked cigarette of a particular brand they both favored, a torn page from a book they had once discussed, subtle breadcrumbs designed to trigger Elias's empathy, to make him hesitate. But Elias's determination, fueled by a potent cocktail of duty, anger, and a profound sense of personal betrayal, only intensified. Each reminder of their shared history only solidified his resolve to stop the man who had become a ghost of his former self. The barren landscape itself seemed to conspire in their struggle. The vast, empty expanses reflected the desolation in Elias's heart, while the jagged, unforgiving rocks mirrored the sharp edges of his resolve. He used his intimate knowledge of David's tactics, predicting his former friend's movements, anticipating his next feint. Where David would expect him to go high, Elias went low. Where David would expect speed, Elias employed stealth. The chase culminated in a remote, isolated canyon, a natural arena carved by millennia of wind and water. The walls rose steeply, casting long, dark shadows that stretched like grasping fingers across the sandy floor. Here, the air was still, heavy with the dust of ages, and the silence was broken only by the rasp of their ragged breaths. Elias cornered David near a cluster of ancient, twisted rocks, their faces grim, bodies aching, but eyes burning with an unyielding intensity. A desperate hand-to-hand combat sequence erupted under the scorching sun. Fists flew, feet lashed out, each blow laden with the weight of their shattered friendship. Elias, despite his wound, fought with a savage grace, his movements honed by years of combat. David, fueled by a twisted sense of justice, matched him blow for blow, his desperation making him reckless, yet terrifyingly effective. Elias managed to gain the upper hand, pinning David against a jagged rock face. David, gasping for breath, refused to surrender, his eyes blazing with defiance. "They took everything, Elias," David rasped, his voice raw. "Mossad, they destroyed my life. This isn't betrayal, it's retribution. They deserved it." His words were a chilling revelation, a glimpse into the deeper, darker reasons behind his treachery, a twisted logic born of perceived injustice. The canyon echoed with their final confrontation, a natural stage for the play of loyalty and vengeance. The raw intensity of David's words hung in the arid air, a venomous confession that momentarily stunned Elias. He stared into his former friend's eyes, searching for a flicker of the man he once knew, but found only a burning, self-righteous fury. David, pinned and breathless, continued his tirade, his voice hoarse with emotion. He spoke of a botched operation years ago, a mission gone sideways that had cost him his family, his reputation, everything. He claimed Mossad had abandoned him, sacrificed his loved ones to protect their own secrets, leaving him to pick up the pieces of a life shattered by their carelessness. This wasn't merely a betrayal for profit. It was a crusade, a twisted quest for balance in a world he felt had wronged him profoundly. Elias felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a sudden, unsettling doubt. Could it be true? Could the agency they had both served so faithfully be capable of such callous disregard? He tried to reason with David, his voice strained, appealing to the shared history, the years of unwavering loyalty they had both pledged. David, this isn't the way. Vengeance will consume you. It will destroy everything you have left. But David merely sneered, a bitter, broken smile playing on his lips. What do I have left, Elias? You tell me. They took it all. This is the only justice I know. His eyes, once full of camaraderie, now held only a chilling emptiness, devoid of any recognition of their past bond. A desperate struggle ensued, not just of physical strength, but of wills. David, with a surge of adrenaline born of his perceived righteousness, lunged, attempting to break free. Elias, though his heart ached with the weight of the moment, knew he could not falter. He was no longer fighting a friend, but a dangerous enemy, one consumed by a vendetta that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their nation's security. His movements were precise, efficient, devoid of the hesitation that had marked their earlier confrontation. He countered David's desperate attacks, his training kicking in, overriding the emotional turmoil raging within him. With a final, decisive move, Elias managed to subdue David, twisting his arm behind his back and forcing him to his knees, his face pressed into the dusty ground. The fight had left them both bruised and battered, their bodies screaming in protest. But the mission, at least this part of it, was complete. As Elias secured David, the crackle of his comms device broke the eerie silence. A cold, detached voice instructed him, "Agent Elias, the order stands. David is to be buried alive. Eradicate all traces. He never existed." The words hung in the air, chilling Elias to the core. Buried alive. A metaphor, he knew, but one that conjured images of the desert swallowing a man whole, leaving no monument, no memory. It was Mossad's ultimate sentence, a complete erasure, a deliberate act of non-existence. It meant not just physical disappearance, but the systematic removal of every record, every photograph, every mention of David's name from their archives. He was to become a ghost, a forgotten whisper in the winds of the desert. A wave of profound sadness washed over Elias. This wasn't the justice he had envisioned, not the closure he had hoped for. It was a stark, brutal reminder of the ruthlessness required in their line of work, the sacrifices demanded, not just of the living, but of the very concept of individual identity. He looked at David, still defiant, still convinced of his righteous path, and felt a pang of despair. He had to carry out the order. There was no other choice. His duty, his loyalty to his country, trumped all personal feelings, all lingering fragments of their shattered friendship. Elias worked methodically, efficiently, his movements precise despite the tremor in his hands. He ensured David's complete disappearance, a silent burial in the vast, indifferent emptiness of the Jordanian desert. The sun beat down mercilessly, as if sanctioning the finality of the act. No words were exchanged, no last rites offered. Just the wind, whispering secrets across the dunes, now carrying the unspoken truth of a man erased, a life extinguished from all official records. Elias stood there for a long moment, the dust settling around him, the silence profound. He had completed his mission, but the victory felt hollow, leaving only the bitter taste of ashes and the chilling echo of a life unmade. The desert, ancient and unforgiving, had claimed another secret, another soul, burying it beneath its shifting sands. Elias returned to the sterile confines of Mossad headquarters, a changed man. The mission was officially declared a resounding success, the nation's security preserved, the threat neutralized. Yet, the victory felt profoundly hollow, an empty shell echoing with the unspoken tragedy of David's fate. He was hailed as a hero, his efficiency and unwavering resolve lauded by his superiors, but the weight of his actions, the chilling finality of what he had been forced to do, gnawed at his soul, haunting his every waking moment and invading his troubled sleep. The desert's silence had been replaced by the clamor of accolades, but neither offered true solace. He found himself constantly thinking of his family, the very reason he fought, the innocent lives he protected with such ferocity. Their faces, vibrant and full of life, were a stark contrast to the desolate image of David's final moments, a silent scream against the backdrop of endless sand. Elias struggled with the profound moral implications of the order he had carried out, the cold, calculated eradication of a human being, regardless of their betrayal. The personal cost of his unwavering loyalty to the agency was becoming increasingly clear, a heavy toll exacted not just on his body, but on his very spirit. He began to question the very nature of justice as administered by Mossad, the fine line between necessary ruthlessness and outright barbarity. Loyalty, once an unshakable pillar of his existence, now felt like a fragile construct, easily manipulated and brutally enforced. Seeking solace, he retreated into the quiet rhythm of his family life, attempting to immerse himself in their warmth and normalcy. Yet the echoes of the desert, the silent witness to his darkest act, remained, a persistent whisper in the quiet moments, a shadow clinging to the edges of his vision. A subtle, insidious doubt began to sprout in his mind, a tiny seed planted by David's desperate, vengeful words. What if David's betrayal wasn't entirely without merit? What if his perceived injustice, his twisted sense of righteousness, stemmed from a deeper rot within the agency itself? The thought was dangerous, heretical, but it lingered, refusing to be dismissed. Elias pushed it down, focusing on the present, on rebuilding the fractured pieces of his inner world. Then, a new assignment landed on his desk. Seemingly routine, a standard intelligence-gathering operation, but an underlying tension permeated the briefing. Elias, now acutely attuned to the subtle currents beneath the surface, noticed inconsistencies, small anomalies in the mission parameters that pricked at his heightened senses. The feeling of being watched, a chilling sense of déjà vu from his time-tracking David, returned with unsettling intensity. It was an old, familiar sensation, one that had always preceded danger. One evening, a cryptic message appeared, slipped under his door, devoid of any identifying marks. It was a single, carefully folded piece of paper with a seemingly innocuous set of numbers and letters. But Elias, with his years of deciphering enemy codes, recognized the pattern. It was a dead drop, a communication meant only for him, placed with precision. The message, when he finally decrypted it, was chillingly brief, a stark warning. The serpent had many heads. David was just one. The blood drained from Elias's face. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The conspiracy was far from over. David might not have been the only one, and perhaps not even the true architect of the betrayal. He was still in danger, perhaps more so now than ever before. The desert had claimed David, but its secrets were far from exhausted, and Elias, by virtue of his actions, had become inextricably linked to them. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. Elias delved deeper into the new assignment, a seemingly innocuous intelligence-gathering operation that now felt riddled with insidious undertones. The inconsistencies he had initially dismissed as bureaucratic oversight began to coalesce into a disturbing pattern. David's desperate, vengeful words, echoing from the desert's embrace, now resonated with horrifying clarity. His betrayal hadn't been an isolated act of malice, but a symptom, a visible pustule on a body already festering with a deeper rot within Mossad itself. The cryptic message, decoded, had been a stark truth. David was merely a pawn, a desperate soul manipulated by a far more powerful and insidious hand. The true architect of the conspiracy, the master puppeteer pulling David's strings, slowly began to emerge from the shadows of Elias's investigation. It was Gideon, the very high-ranking official who had personally assigned Elias to the David mission, the man who had been a mentor, a guiding light, a seemingly unblemished pillar of the agency. Elias's mind replayed earlier interactions with Gideon, now seen through a new, sinister lens. The subtle pressures, the carefully worded directives, the almost too convenient flow of information. All of it clicked into place with chilling precision. Gideon had orchestrated David's downfall, not to protect the agency, but to eliminate a loose end, a potential threat to his own meticulously constructed web of deceit. The horrifying realization struck Elias with the force of a physical blow. He was now the target. Gideon, recognizing Elias's meticulous nature and his unwavering dedication to truth, deemed him a liability for knowing too much, for seeing beyond the carefully constructed facade. The game had shifted, and Elias was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. He faced a monumental choice: expose the truth and risk everything, including his life and the lives of those he loved, or remain silent, allowing the corruption to fester, to consume the very institution he had sworn to protect. His conscience, however, afforded him no such luxury. The image of his family, the innocent lives he fought to protect, solidified his resolve. He would expose Gideon, no matter the cost. The final confrontation wouldn't take place beneath the scorching desert sun, but within the sterile, hushed corridors of Mossad itself, a battle fought with wits and courage rather than bullets and sand. Elias, drawing upon every ounce of his training and experience, began to meticulously build his case. He used his skills to outmaneuver Gideon's watchful eyes, to bypass the layers of security and loyalty Gideon had cultivated. He gathered undeniable proof of the corruption, piecing together fragments of intercepted communications, financial irregularities, and inconsistencies in past intelligence reports that now screamed betrayal. The climax arrived not with an explosion, but with a tense, quiet standoff in Gideon's office. Elias presented his evidence, a carefully constructed narrative of Gideon's treachery, laid bare for all to see. Gideon, initially arrogant and dismissive, slowly crumbled under the weight of the undeniable proof. The facade of the loyal officer shattered, revealing the ruthless, self-serving manipulator beneath. The ensuing investigation was swift and brutal, tearing through the upper echelons of Mossad. Elias's courage brought down powerful figures, exposing a network of corruption that had threatened to cripple the agency from within. The resolution, however, was not a clear-cut, happy ending. The victory felt tainted, the scars of betrayal etched deep into the soul of the organization. Elias, having fulfilled his duty, found himself profoundly changed. The world of espionage, once a clear path of duty and sacrifice, now appeared muddled, stained by the very evils it sought to combat. He walked away from Mossad, scarred but with his integrity intact, a lone figure choosing a different path. The desert remained, holding its endless secrets, its vastness a metaphor for the unanswerable questions of loyalty, justice, and the true cost of service. Elias carried his own secrets now, the echoes of David's final moments, Gideon's chilling betrayal, and the harsh lessons learned under the unforgiving sun. He stood on a new horizon, a lone figure, forever marked by the sands of Jordan, a testament to a battle fought and won, but never truly forgotten.